Okay, here we go. We are now recording live. And we're in America. Here we are with Ambassador Hambley. Ambassador Mark Hambley, my friend, and he is or was the US ambassador to Lebanon and to Doha, Qatar, and he served in Yemen prior to that. Well, his first major posting was in Yemen, but also in Alexandria in Egypt, where he's Consul General, and indeed
in the kingdom.
Yes, and in
Lebanon,
absolutely.
Jordan, Libya, Tunisia, many places, William.
Yes, exactly.
London.
Well, here we are. We're going to talk about various things, but we're going to start and talk about Yemen.
Good.
Which is a place you particularly know and love because it's where you served at the time years ago when you were first becoming a major figure on the diplomatic stage. And what do we say? The Yemen, poor Yemen. I mean, the place is broken apart. We have a cholera outbreak, which is the worst in history? Well, not worst in history, worst in this current times, isn't it?
Well, they've had several different cholera outbreaks in Yemen since the unfortunate aggression of March 2015 started. And it is at the moment, I believe that's been alleviated somewhat, but it ebbs and flows, but at one point had 1.4 million casualties, which is one of the largest casualties of cholera in modern times.
Yeah, horrifying. And then we have food shortages. We had an attempt by apparently quite a wonderful, what appears to have been a wonderful attempt by the British UN envoy for Yemen. Martin Griffiths is his name?
Yes, Martin Griffiths.
And he really made an attempt at starting a ceasefire as a way forward. I'm never that keen on ceasefires. I prefer peace process personally, but that's a personal thing. But because I think ceasefires kick the can down the road, but it was so desperately needed, and fair dues, he made a major effort to get a ceasefire in the port of Hodeida where the food was coming in. But that seems not entirely to have failed, but it hasn't succeeded. Would that be right?
Yeah, well, the Stockholm talks, which were the first major talks since the failure of the Kuwaiti process at the beginning of this conflict, resulted in an agreement whereby there was to have been a withdrawal of the Ansar Allah, the Houthi forces, from Hodeida to permit the entry from this major port in Yemen of very needed food assistance. This has been blockaded by the coalition led by Saudi Arabia and other countries from entering Yemen for a number of years, frankly. And but that has only partially succeeded. There has been some withdrawal of the UAE and Saudi forces from outside the city. The UN has arrived in Hodeida, but the relief has not been as rapid or as successful as anticipated. But some is coming through.
Well, that's a blessing. I mean, on top of that, you have a kind of liberation of some areas from Houthi control, but that hasn't brought happiness either, because then you have militias moving in. You have, of course, major areas that are under the semi-control of Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. You have militias supported by the United Arab Emirates. You have militias supported by the Saudis. You have, of course, even in the liberated areas, you have those that are still supportive of Ansar al-Islam. So all these, or the Houthis, Ansar Allah, I beg your pardon, the Houthis. So in the end of the day, the liberated areas aren't really liberated. They're just more squabbling.
Well, it's a confused situation, a complicated situation. I think it's fair to say that 80% of the population remain under control of the Sana'a government, which is led by Ansar Allah. But it's a vast country, so huge swaths of land in the southern parts of the country are under UAE and Saudi and some of the militias. Al-Qaeda of the Arabian Peninsula, as you know, also has a presence down there as well. There is also a distant movement which has been in play for a number of years to restore the sovereignty of the Hadramaut and others to the south into their own separate country again. So there's all these issues which play into a process where Yemen has got to be brought forward to a negotiating stance where these issues can be sorted and the country can be brought back together again in a way which allows remarkable Yemeni people to exercise their great gifts and develop their country in a way to bring it back to the concord of nations.
So it's actually a horrid mess. I mean, is there anything else in this catalogue of misery? We've talked about...
Well, there are all sorts of other issues involved. There's a major water crisis in Yemen, which has been... Yemen is a country which Sana'a was always reported to be the first capital city which one day would lose its water within the next decade. We've seen Cape Town and Chennai in India, both under threat of losing their water supply. Because of climate change, there have been huge impacts in Yemen. The monsoons have not been as regular as they've been in the past. They've had some rains which have helped local agriculture produce, so there has been somewhat of a harvest. But basically you have a situation in Yemen where you have a breakdown of governance because you don't have the central bank has moved from Sana'a to Hodeidah, so salaries are not being paid. I don't believe they've been paid since 2016. So people are very much impoverished. The impact of civilian and military deaths is extremely high. The UN puts a low figure, maybe 70,000. It may be as high as 200,000 or more. Many of these are children. Children have suffered disproportionately in this conflict. You see pictures of poor Yemeni kids. It brings tears to one's eyes to see the suffering that women and children from all sides are being the big victims of this war. We have got to find a way in which the United Nations is brought in a more effective way to find a solution to this. And that means you have to have the permanent members of the Security Council, the P5, and other key countries have got to come together in one voice and end this war, and they're not doing that.
And just to pick up on one point there, with the casualty figures, one of the differences with the UN calculating casualty figures, I mean, when they calculated casualty figures in the Syrian war, they included combatants in the figures they released. Here they are not. And in view of the fact that a substantial proportion of the dead are combatants, the casualty figures are much higher in part for that reason.
Yes.
And so why are we not? I mean, the world is just watching this miserable situation. Are we doing nothing? Are we really? I mean, not enough. We're arming the various sides.
We're all arming one side.
Well, yes. Yeah.
No, the difficult, of course, Yemen is just one small picture in an ongoing struggle between, frankly, Saudi Arabia and Iran for predominance in the area in terms of influence. The U.S., of course, supports Saudi Arabia because we also believe Iran has ambitions which are against our interests. We've got to break that from being part of part of our general discussion. Iran indeed has influence in Yemen. It's had influence there for a number of years. They are supplying some military assistance to Yemen, to the government in Sana'a, and this is one of the reasons why the Saudis, of course, the reason they went into the war to begin with was to eliminate this potential threat from Iran in Yemen. But whether that's a threat is something which is debatable.
Well, in so much as the degree of Iran's control or influence in Yemen is very low in reality. But nonetheless, the Yemenis, I mean, they have now something approaching a cruise missile type facility, don't they?
The Yemenis are very clever, yes. They have they've been able to take their amazingly large stockpile of older weapons and reconfigure those into modern, more modern designs, including a type of cruise missile. I don't know if it's actually been deployed or not. They've, of course, used their Scud missiles, which with some Iranian help they've been able to reconfigure and launch those into Saudi Arabia as well. Drones is the technology which is complained that is Iranian technology. that may be, but the Yemenis are capable of making that themselves, and they have had some effect in attacking even Abha airport in Saudi Arabia. This must be disconcerting to the Saudis, understandably. It's disconcerting to the United States as well, and to other members of the United Nations, which is embarked on a process of trying to find a way to resolve this crisis, but it hasn't been resolute enough.
And what we need is a resolution, that maintains the unity of Yemen, or are we past that now? Is Yemen going to fragment and north?
No. Again, I think it's something for the Yemenis themselves have got to be in a position where they negotiate their future with a good neutral outside party helping them bring together that process. Thus far, I think the certain outside powers have had influence on the parties, have kept them from negotiating in the best of faith. And so I think we have got to help Martin Griffiths get his proposals reinvigorated. We've got to bring together the Stockholm process. One aspect, in addition to the relief of Hodeidah, was to bring together the parties for a future for political discussion. Another one, this has got to be prioritized.
That's the big
once again. And this will take key countries urging the Saudis and the United Arab Emirates, which I understand is perhaps reconsidering its rather significant involvement in Yemen somewhat, withdrawing some troops back to the Emirates itself. But we've got to make sure these countries all agree that Yemen is a problem which can be resolved. There should be a good future between Saudi Arabia and Yemen, a symbiotic relationship between those two countries. But I'm afraid that the last 5 years have created such bloodshed, such ill feeling between the two. It'll be a long time process in coming.
Well, let's hope for the sooner the better.
Absolutely.
Oh, bless your heart. Thank you. We'll pause there. That's really helpful. Thank you, Ambassador Hambley. Bless you.